My name is Willa, and I turned 66 in March. Last October, my daughter's in-laws invited me to spend Thanksgiving weekend at their property in the Laurentians. 4 days, 11 meals, a lake view they mentioned every 40 minutes, and a language they were absolutely certain I could not follow. They spoke it at the front door when I arrived. They spoke it across the dinner table, while I sat at the far end with a wine glass. I held the way you hold something, just to have something to hold. They spoke it on the back deck with their shoulders turned, 2 feet from my chair, the way people speak in a room where they've decided the furniture is listening, but not understanding. They called me L'Anglaise Tranquille, the quiet English widow. They kept refilling my glass. Not one of them asked me a single question about myself. By Saturday night, I had heard everything, every plan, every instruction, every assumption they had made about what I was. And what I chose to do about it the following Tuesday morning, sitting across a boardroom table on Bank Street, with their notary watching, and my letter in the center of the table, is the only reason I'm telling you any of this. Welcome to Bold Mom Stories, where the quietest woman in the room is usually the one who wrote the clause. The invitation came from my daughter, not from her in-laws. That told me something right away. She called on a Thursday afternoon in September, talking quickly in the way she does when she has already decided and wants me to agree before I've thought it through. Mom, Thanksgiving at the Beaumont property, you'll love it. It'll be good for everyone. Not good for me. Good for everyone. I said I would come. My daughter is 34. She married Anton Beaumont, 18 months, Hans well-established Quebec family that has been in property development for 2 generations, which means they have opinions about materials and views and the right kind of stone on a fireplace. His mother and father live most of the year in Laval. I had met them twice before this weekend. Both times they were warm and gracious, and somehow managed to leave me with the feeling that being warm and gracious to me had cost them something. The Beaumont property sits on a private lake above St. Donat, 90 minutes north of Montreal, 3.5 hours from Ottawa. I drove it alone on the Friday, the same kind of drive I have been making alone since February, 3 years ago, when my husband Edmund died of a heart attack in the parking lot of the lumber yard on Industrial Road at 8:30 in the morning, with a coffee in his hand, and 300 pages of active files on his desk. I stopped in Santa Agathe and bought a jar of dark honey and 2 bottles of cider from an orchard stand on the highway, because you do not arrive at someone's house empty-handed, whatever their invitation says. The cider sat on the counter all weekend unopened. Nobody touched it. The Beaumont property is not a chalet in any sense I would use that word. It is a compound, a main house of cedar and fieldstone, a guest cabin connected by a covered walkway, a boathouse, and a dock with a motorboat under a gray tarp for the season. My son-in-law's father had built the main house in the late 90s and added the guest cabin a decade later. He mentioned the square footage once, at dinner, to a neighbor who had not asked. I did not mention that I already knew the rough dimensions of the property, the way you know a room you once drew the access easement for. My son-in-law's mother met me at the car. She is 63, silver blonde, wearing linen that had no right to look that untroubled after a full day. She kissed me on both cheeks, and then turned to my daughter, who was standing behind her, holding a stack of folded napkins, and said something in French that was not intended for me. I want to be very clear about what I did in that moment, because it matters later. I said the drive had been easy. I admired the view of the lake going dark and silver in the last of the afternoon. I did not react to what she said. I set my bag down and kept my face at rest. My son-in-law's father came from the direction of the boathouse with a bottle already open and poured me a glass of Okanagan White before asking whether I wanted one. He is 67. Gray at the temples, broad through the shoulders in the way of men who played rugby in their 20s and have not entirely let go of it. He called me Willa, with the English vowels slightly flattened, the way a francophone does when they've learned English well, but haven't entirely chosen it. He said he'd heard a great deal about me. I thought, You have heard that I am a retired accountant who did the books at a small surveying company. That is the short version my daughter tells because it is easier. It is also not right. Dinner. The first night was 8 people at a table meant for 10. My son-in-law's parents, my daughter and my son-in-law, 2 couples from along the same lake road who were pleasant and had a son on his phone, and me at the far end with a clear view of the window and a glass I kept at 3/4 because I was doing other things with my attention. At some point during the meal, my son-in-law's father stood and raised his glass to what he called the joining of 2 families. Everyone clinked. My son-in-law looked at the tablecloth when he did it. I noticed. I filed it, which is what I do instead of speaking too soon. It has taken me most of my life to decide whether that is a strength or a habit I never examined. After dinner, my son-in-law's father walked me out to the dock to tell me about himself, which he did not experience as a favor to himself, but which was one. He talked about the family company, mid-rise residential in the Laval corridor, some commercial work south of Montreal, and the projects he was proudest of. Then his voice changed. 3 years ago, he said, they'd had a disagreement with CRA, a corporate reassessment. The agency decided their CCPC structure didn't hold up under the attribution rules. 18 months of correspondence, penalties, interest. 2 lenders pulled their facilities. He swirled his glass. Do you know what that means for a developer? I know exactly what it means. It means your cost of capital increases while you're managing projects already running thin. It means the word travels in the industry within a quarter. It means you spend the next 2 years rebuilding what took you 20 to establish. It got expensive, I said. It got humiliating, he said. And then, but water under the bridge. We have a new entity now, clean structure. He went inside. I stood on the dock a few minutes longer looking at the lake in the dark and thinking about the phrase new entity and what a man needs when he needs a new company to carry weight his old one no longer can. Saturday morning, I was up at 6. I made coffee in their kitchen and took it to the sitting room with a second-hand Gabrielle Roy I had been meaning to finish since spring. My daughter came downstairs at 7 in her robe, hair already managed, which I have never once achieved before 9. Oh, let me get that, she said, and picked up my coffee mug from the side table before I'd answered. She placed it on a coaster. She looked at the chair I was sitting in and made a sympathetic face. The light is better over there, she said, pointing to an armchair in the corner that faced the wall instead of the window. Better for your eyes. I thanked her and moved. She went to join her mother-in-law on the back deck. I turned the corner chair toward the window and kept reading. Mid-afternoon, I was on the side porch when my son-in-law's parents stood at the deck railing with their backs to the water, which meant they were facing the property and not toward me. It was not deliberate. Somehow that is the part that stays with you. My son-in-law's mother said, in French, that she hoped the weekend would go smoothly. My son-in-law's father said, don't worry. She doesn't understand a word. She's English through and through, and then something about timing, about his notary in Ottawa, about needing the paperwork handled before the end of the month. I had my book open. I turned a page. I did not look up. I want to say something plainly about that moment, because it is what people ask me most. I was not angry in the way that makes you say something you'll want back later. I was very still. I have been still in rooms where people made decisions about what I was since 1987, when I walked into my first meeting with a Quebec contractor, and he asked who the engineer was, and I said, I am. You learn a particular economy of attention. You decide how much of yourself to spend on this moment, and this was not the moment. I turned another page. Sunday afternoon, my son-in-law's father walked me through the main house to show me his study, because I had mentioned the stonework on the property was beautiful, and he had a photograph he wanted to show me. The study is a small room off the main hallway, bookshelves, a standing desk, a window that looks onto the woodpile. On the wall behind the desk, framed in dark maple, there was a survey plan, the kind that gets framed when a family is proud of a piece of land. Boundaries in black ink, lot numbers, a scale bar at the bottom, a north arrow, a site plan for a property in Hull, Quebec, dated May 1994. I looked at it. In the lower right corner, where the surveying firm stamps their license, Morrow Land Services Limited, Ottawa, W. Morrow, OLS number 1147. W. Morrow is me. I have been W. Morrow since April of 1984, when I passed the Ontario Land Surveyor licensing examination and Edmund and I registered the company. We surveyed that Hull property in the spring of 1994. I remember the project because it was the first large Gatineau area commission we'd taken on after expanding across the river. And because the client negotiated the price down, past what I thought was reasonable, and I let it go to what I thought was fair and then held that number without moving, and he paid it. My son-in-law's father had hired Morrow Land Services through some referral 30 years ago, dealt with whoever answered the phone, received a signed plan with my name and license number in the corner, and had it framed and hung on his wall in the house he built on that land. He did not know that the woman who had surveyed his property was standing in his study in October, being called L'Anglaise Tranquille, and having her glass refilled before she asked for it. I looked at the plan for 4 seconds. Then I said it was a fine piece of property and asked what they'd paid per front foot. He told me he had paid what he should have. That night, after dinner, while the others were outside on the dock, watching the last of the light leave the lake, my son-in-law's father sat at the kitchen island with a glass of bourbon and 2 pages of paper squared up on the granite. He slid them toward me when I came through for water. "Saves me chasing you tomorrow," he said pleasantly. "It is honestly just a housekeeping item. Part of the estate planning they're doing. Very straightforward." I put on my reading glasses. I have kept them on a chain since 1998. I read the document slowly, starting with the recitals, because the recitals are where people tell you the truth without meaning to. Second recital, second line. That certain marriage contract dated the 14th of September of this year, entered into by and between Anton R. Beaumont and Paige E. Morrow, pursuant to the laws of Quebec. Operative paragraph, third line. The undersigned shareholder hereby unconditionally waives any and all rights under Article 6 of the Shareholders' Agreement of Morrow Land Services Limited, dated the 3rd of October 1986. 3 things arrived at the same moment. My daughter had signed a marriage contract 3 weeks earlier and had not told me. This weekend was not Thanksgiving, and whoever had drafted that waiver had read Article 6 with great care. I set the pages down on the granite, gently. "I left my distance glasses in the car," I said. "These are the wrong pair for fine print. I'll look at it properly in the morning." I was wearing my reading glasses. He did not know this, because knowing it would have required him to look at my face at some point in the past 2 days. "It's truly just a formality," he said, and put his hand flat on the 2 pages. "Then the morning won't change anything," I said. He laughed and said, "I must be tired from the long drive up." I said good night and took my water upstairs. I did not sleep. The main house has an older forced air heating system with cast iron floor registers, the original type from the 1999 build. The one in my guest room sat directly above the kitchen. At 11:30, I heard chairs move below me. My daughter and her mother-in-law, in French. My daughter, tense. What if she actually reads it? Her mother-in-law, unhurried. "Don't worry. She doesn't understand a word. She's English through and through." I lay on my back in that guest room, and I held that sentence. I had first heard it at 4:30 on the side porch. That time, I took it to mean I didn't speak French. Lying there at 11:30, I understood what it actually meant. She will not understand what she is signing. They were not wrong yet. I did not fully understand what I was being asked to sign. Not yet. But I knew Article 6 existed. I had typed it myself in October of 1986, at the kitchen table on Wellington Street West, on a machine that smelled of hot plastic when it ran too long. I left Sunday morning at 7:15. The lake was flat and white with October mist. My daughter came out in her cardigan, barefoot on the cold gravel. "You're leaving early." "Long drive back," I said. She asked if I'd had a good weekend in the voice you use when you need the answer to be yes so that everyone can go back to normal. I closed the trunk and turned around. Did you know your father and I surveyed your in-laws' Hull property in 1994? She looked at me. What? The framed plan in the study. That's my license number, W. Morrow, OLS 1147. My signature. We did that survey in the spring. I watched her try to place it, try to understand what it meant, and I could see that she couldn't. She had been 17 in 1994. Did you read the marriage contract? I asked. The color shifted in her face. Anton's family's lawyer explained it, she said. It's standard for Quebec couples. The assets go into the family patrimony. Which assets? She looked at the gravel. I got in the car. I drove south without the radio, past Santa Gath where the highway narrows and opens again, through the border back into Ontario and down to Ottawa. I did not go home. I drove straight to the office on Industrial Road, let myself in the side door, turned on the lights over the drafting room. I want to describe what an empty office does on a Sunday, because it is the correct place for what I did next. It hums and settles and smells of toner and old paper, and it has no opinion about you, and there is something in that I have always found steadying. In the filing cabinet behind my office door, second drawer from the bottom, there is an accordion file labeled Pay Orp, Original Docs. Inside is the executed original of the shareholders' agreement of Morrow Land Services Limited, dated the 3rd of October 1986, with 3 ink signatures on the last page. Mine, Edmund's, and his brother Roger's, who held 15% from 1986 until 2004 when he retired to Nova Scotia and sold his shares back under this exact agreement. His wife hired a lawyer in Halifax who looked at the document for 6 weeks and advised her to take the buyout. I signed the check. I sat in Edmund's chair, which nobody has adjusted in 3 years, and I read Article 6 aloud in that empty office because a document gives you different things when you make your voice do the work. Article 6.1, Standard Right of First Refusal. No shareholder shall transfer shares without first offering them to the company and then to the remaining shareholders. Every closely held company in Canada has some version of this. It exists so that when your business partner's circumstances change, you have a say in who ends up sitting across from you. Article 6.2 is where I stopped. Transfer shall include, without limitation, any disposition of shares pursuant to any domestic contract or marriage contract, and any change in the effective ownership of shares arising from any change in matrimonial regime. I had put that clause there because in the summer of 1986, I had read about a case in Ontario where a business partner's wife claimed shares during a divorce and the remaining shareholders had no mechanism to respond. I typed it on a machine that smelled of hot plastic because I thought, this is careful. Edmund said I was being excessive. He said it warmly, the way he said most things. Article 6.3. Purchase price, at book value per share, certified by the company's regular accountant, using the historical accounting method consistently applied. Book value is what a company is worth according to the numbers written down when they happened. Our land on Industrial Road is on our books at what we paid for it in 1991. What that land is worth today is a very different sentence. The books do not care. The books have said the same number for 34 years, and they will say it until someone sells the ground. I have always appreciated the integrity of that. It is a number that tells the truth about the past and says nothing about the present, and it never apologizes for either. Article 6.4. Written notice within 10 business days of execution of any triggering instrument. 30 days for the remaining shareholders to elect. My daughter had signed the marriage contract on September 14th. I had received no notice. That was her obligation, and she had not met it. Not because she was trying to deceive me. I was certain, but because nobody had told her this clause existed. But a missed notice deadline does not extinguish a right. You cannot be defaulted out of something you were never told was triggered. Your 30 days runs from actual knowledge. I had learned of the triggering instrument on Sunday morning, standing on cold gravel in the Laurentians. My 30 days ran from that morning. I drove home. I called my lawyer, Suzanne, from the kitchen table and left a message. I opened a bottle of red I had been keeping for no particular occasion and thought about Edmund, who had said I was being excessive in October of 1986 and who was not right about that. Suzanne met me Tuesday morning on Bank Street. She is 52 and has done corporate work for owner-operated businesses since the 90s. She read the shareholders' agreement without speaking and without changing her expression. Then she said, "This clause has been exercised before." 2004, I said. Edmund's brother. We exercised it cleanly. His wife's counsel reviewed for 6 weeks and settled. She set the agreement down. Then it isn't decorative. A restriction that has never been enforced starts to look like a suggestion. One that has been enforced once, with opposing counsel who ultimately advised settlement, is a different thing. That distinction matters more than most people think. She walked me through the mechanism twice, because I asked her to once, and then asked again to make sure I had it precisely. The marriage contract signed September 14th was the triggering instrument. The moment it was executed, it created a transfer of effective control over my daughter's shares under Article 6.2. The notice obligation had passed without being met, but that failure ran from my daughter, not from me. My right stood. My 30 days ran from actual knowledge, the morning of October 12th. "How quickly can you fund?" Suzanne asked. I told her what I had liquid. I told her what I would need. I went to the bank on Wednesday. Bernard, who has been our accountant since 1992 and who delivers every piece of information in exactly the same measured voice, whether it is good news or terrible, issued the book value certificate by Wednesday afternoon. Same historical method, consistently applied. The number was what it was, not what the company would fetch from a buyer, which I knew because a firm out of Calgary had sent my son-in-law an unsolicited letter of interest 18 months ago that used a much larger number. Same shares, same week, two entirely different worlds, and the only thing standing between them is which accounting method a paragraph says to use. On Thursday, I went to my branch on Spark Street and sat across from a loans officer who was perfectly polite and who asked whether I had someone helping me look this over, ma'am. I did not get angry. Getting angry at someone for saying out loud what a room has been thinking since you walked in is a waste of a useful afternoon. I slid 2 documents across his desk, the book value certificate and the Calgary letter of interest. I explained the loan-to-value ratio to him in 1 sentence. He read both pages and then looked up. The commitment letter was signed before 4 o'clock. On his way out, he asked what had happened in 1984. I told him I would send him a link. Suzanne's office produced the election letter on Friday morning. Notice of election to purchase pursuant to Article 6.4 of the Shareholders' Agreement of Morrow Land Services Limited, electing to purchase all 5,000 shares held by Paige E. Morrow. Purchase price at book value per share per the accountant's certificate, dated as of September 14th. Attached, the certificate. Attached, the bank commitment letter. An election without proof of funding is a threat. You cannot back up. I have never sent one of those. Certified mail, return receipt requested. To my daughter at her home address. To the company at the Industrial Road office. Courtesy copy to the notary in Hull, whose name was on the waiver documents. I drove it to the postal outlet on Richmond Road myself Friday afternoon and stood in line behind a woman mailing a birthday parcel to Vancouver. The clerk stamped the green cards and handed me the receipts. Expected delivery, Monday morning. That evening, my daughter called, not about the letter. It hadn't arrived yet. But to say her in-laws were coming to Ottawa Tuesday and had booked a private room at a restaurant on Elgin Street and wanted everyone together for what her father-in-law was calling a signing dinner. I looked at my phone for a long time. I thought about what certified mail moves at and whether I wanted to intercept what was already in motion. I did not want to. I typed back, "I'll be there. Tuesday." The restaurant was the kind of place with linen napkins and a view of the canal, the water black and still in October. My son-in-law's parents were already seated when I arrived. His father in a navy blazer, his mother in a cream blouse, and a man I hadn't met who turned out to be their notary from Hull. He had the expression of a professional who does not expect complications at an event he has been engaged to witness. My daughter and my son-in-law arrived together and sat across from me. The first 30 minutes were warm and ordinary. Wine, bread, conversation about the Thanksgiving weekend, and the weather turning. Then my son-in-law's father reached into his jacket pocket, produced 2 folded pages, and set them in front of me on the tablecloth. He had a pen in his other hand. "Since we're all here," he said pleasantly, "we might as well make it official tonight." I reached into my bag and produced my own envelope, a copy of the election letter, which Suzanne had prepared for exactly this moment. I set it on the table, unsealed. "The original was delivered by certified mail this morning," I said. "I believe you have all received copies by now." The notary picked up the letter. He read it once. He set it down and picked it up again. My son-in-law's father said in a controlled voice, "Willa, what is this?" "My election to purchase under Article 6.4, I said. The marriage contract, signed September 14th, triggered the preemption provision. Article 6.2 defines transfer to include any disposition pursuant to any marriage contract and any change in effective ownership arising from any change in matrimonial regime. The marriage contract is the triggering instrument. The right was live from the moment it was signed. The election was filed Friday. Funding is in place." He said this was not what the clause was intended for. "It was exercised in 2004, I said. Opposing counsel reviewed it for 6 weeks and settled. An enforced clause is not the same thing as an unenforced one." My son-in-law's mother said something to her husband, low and fast in French. She said, "She cannot possibly have the money." "The bank commitment letter is attached to the election," I said, in French, not looking at her husband, looking at her. The table went still in the way that rooms go still. Not silent, there were other diners. A waiter went past with something warm, but within the radius of our table, everything dropped a register. I said, in French, still looking at her, "You said that on Saturday afternoon on the back deck, 2 feet from my chair. You said it again at 11:30 Saturday night. She doesn't understand a word. She's English through and through." I turned to my daughter for 1 second and then back. "I learned French at La Cité in 1991. I have used it in professional dealings for 30 years. The survey plan on the wall of your study, the one framed in the dark maple frame, Hull, May 1994. That is my license number in the corner, OLS 1147. W. Morrow. My firm surveyed that property. You built your family's compound on land I measured. You have just never once asked who W. Morrow was." I said all of that quietly. I want that on the record. I have never once in my life arrived anywhere by being loud. My son-in-law's father looked at the table. The notary was reading the election letter for the 3rd time. My son-in-law had both hands flat on the tablecloth and was looking at the centerpiece. My son-in-law's father recovered. He is a man who has come through worse than this and knows the machinery of composure. He said there must be a way to make this work for everyone. That families found paths through these things. "This is not a family matter," I said. "It is a shareholders' agreement I drafted in 1986 and an election I filed on Friday. We close when your daughter's counsel is ready." My daughter said my name once. "We'll talk Thursday," I said. "I have something for you." Outside on the sidewalk afterward, waiting for my car, I looked at the Rideau Canal. The water was black and still, and the maples along the bank had gone deep amber in the October dark. 2 cyclists went past on the path. One of them rang a bell at nothing in particular. Here is what happened after, as briefly as I can say it. The notary sent a letter the following week arguing that the marriage contract had been mischaracterized and did not constitute a transfer within the meaning of Article 6.2. Suzanne replied with a copy of the article and the 2004 settlement documentation. No further letters came. We closed in November. In Suzanne's boardroom, not at a restaurant, with 2 lawyers and an accountant and a great deal of initialing. I own 10,000 shares of Morrow Land Services Limited. I own all of them alone for the first time in 39 years. It is not the feeling I expected, which is to say, it is not triumphant. It is more like standing in the office on a Sunday when the lights are on and the equipment is quiet and you remember with great precision why you built it in the first place. My daughter has been staying with me since early November. Directly. She arrived on a Wednesday evening with her winter coat and a bag, and we drank tea in the kitchen for 2 hours without mentioning the shareholders' agreement. She has been here since. On the Thursday after closing, I placed a single page on the kitchen table in front of her while she was having her morning coffee. An offer to sell her back 5,000 shares, her original half, at the same book value price, same method, same number. Good for 5 years. One condition: she reads it before she signs. She read it that morning, at the kitchen table. She read it twice. She looked up at me. "Mom, I didn't know about Article 6. "I know," I said. "You could have told me, when I got married, when Dad died, at some point before any of this." She was right. I had thought there would be time. Edmund had thought she would come to it on her own. We were wrong in the comfortable way parents are wrong, the kind of wrong that doesn't feel urgent until it is. "I'm telling you now," I said, "the offer is good until 2029. Read everything before you sign it." She folded the page and put it in her bag. She has not signed it yet. She knows it is there. I think that is the point of it. The honey from Santa Gathy is still on my kitchen counter. I opened it 2 weeks ago. It is good honey. Dark, slightly medicinal, the way honey is when the bees have had a serious autumn. I put it on toast in the mornings and think about the drive up in October, the mist on the lake, the cast iron floor register above the kitchen, and a survey plan in a dark maple frame on a wall in the Laurentians that has had my name on it for 30 years, waiting for someone to stand still long enough to read the corner. I am 66 years old. I still look things up. And I am finally willing to say this plainly. The quiet is not smallness. It is a position. It has a view of the room that no one else gets. And if you can stay in it long enough, the people who are certain you don't understand anything will eventually set the paperwork down in front of you themselves. That is my story. One Thanksgiving weekend, one letter, and a clause I typed in October of 1986 that Edmund said was excessive. He was not right about that one.